gives me great pleasure for this episode of What the Lux to talk to, I think, someone who's been termed the godfather of river cruising, and is certainly one of the most passionate people in the travel industry that I've met. Rudi. Rudi, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, in fact, thank you for having me. I think it's impossible not to start this podcast without saying that we're recording this 2 days after the wildfires finished in Los Angeles. And I landed actually around 2 hours after they stopped. And it feels a little bit bittersweet that it's been raining ever since I arrived. Could have probably done with that a little bit.
I mean, that's good for right now. And the rain is not too heavy, so we don't have any scary landslides here. So otherwise, it would have been really scary with a lot of rain. But it's good to have humidity out here right now.
For sure. Thank God they finished. Rudi, can we just start by, what was your journey into travel? You've had a pretty interesting journey within the travel industry itself. And can you just bring that to life to begin with before we start talking about the business?
I mean, the journey really started when I was 21. Got my first passport, and my roommate and I decided to go on vacation to Afghanistan. I'm from Vienna, so it was at that time not such a big distance. And
why Afghanistan?
Afghanistan was at that time 1973, the hippie road and so on. Yeah. And so we ended up on a 7-month journey all the way to Sikkim, Nepal, and we drove through all the Arabian countries. Had a wonderful time in Afghanistan. And we ended up with about 4 months doing a research study with the Limbus in eastern Nepal on the border to Sikkim. And coming back, we thought we can sell the story to some local magazines and so on, and actually send out 200 letters to newspapers, magazines, and the 2 biggest Austrian newspapers contacted us. And the Kronenzeitung, the biggest Austrian paper, signed a contract with us for 20 weeks, every Sunday 2 pages about our journey. It was monster. Yeah,
it's a dream.
It was a dream.
Your words were fueling your mileage.
And it started on a Sunday issue on a cover. The cover was the 3 of us in front of the Himalaya on top of our Volkswagen van. Yeah, and we were straight off the press. We took a stack of the papers. We went into town, signed signatures and so on, and had a wonderful time. With that contract, actually, then we decided we can do it again. So the second trip actually was a year later, where we spent 14 months driving from New York to Peru, spending almost 7 months in Peru with about 5 months on a raft in the Amazon, and everything already with newspaper contracts. We had a guy sitting in Vienna. We just sent articles from our trip all the time over there. And so I started, when I was in high school, I wanted to study either chemistry or art. My brother and I had a chemistry lab at home, but in the end I decided on architecture, somewhere in between mathematics and art, which wasn't probably the right choice.
Hang on a moment, let's just cycle back and just focus on this for a second. Your brother and yourself had a chemistry lab in your house.
Yes.
You then moved into architecture before then stepping into the world of travel.
But moving in, I mean, the summer travel was just a summer vacation trip that was originally planned. Yeah, I was still registered at the university. I had a scholarship for that trip. I mean, we also sent out a request for scholarships to the different ministries, Ministry of Education and so on. And we got a scholarship for our research. So on the second trip again, we sent out again. We got research money again from the Austrian government, and it was based and focused on the study with the Achuara Indians, in Peru, in the Peruvian Amazon, and after the first trip, I also registered for anthropology. So I was studying architecture and anthropology, and all my research was based on the change of housing depending how indigenous people changed their lifestyles with outside influence. Going from the single home to a settlement, what does it change? It changed, for example, in Peru, from the huge family home where 3 generations and up to 50 people live in one big house. It changed to settlements where they split up in smaller units, from the influence from outside, the whole structure. And with that structure, the housing structure also changed. So that was my part of this study.
That's such an interesting thing to study. So it's sort of the dissemination of extended family life and the impact on the design of houses.
Yeah, but the basic idea was travel.
Yeah.
and how to monetize the travel the best and how to get funding. So for the second trip, actually, we got a car from Mercedes, a van. We got cameras from Roli. We got money. Everything was paid for. We got a contract with the newspapers. We got the government scholarships and so on. We ended up selling collections to the Museum of Anthropology in Vienna, as well as in Zurich and in Basel. So we made actually very good money during those years. And the year afterwards, I went back to the Peru. I hired a group of a whole family from another indigenous family with a boat and went out on a shopping trip just to shop and buy stuff for museums. And that was kind of the end of adventure because it's really turned kind of into a business. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was kind of my last major trip like that. Then I worked 1 year as an architect in Vienna. Yeah. And couldn't sit in an office too long. And also in the summertime, what I did, I was working as a tour guide for American college students.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was summer trips. Some of them were as long as 56 days, 8 weeks, from London all the way down to the Greek Isles back to London. Yeah, they flew over with Freddie Laker and started in London all the way back. And on a normal group, you had about 40, 45 college grads, 22, 23-year-old. Yeah. Usually about 70, 80% girls. There was guys. And it was really like 8 weeks of party time in Europe. It was exhausting for the tour guide.
But hang on, this is mid-20s, are we talking?
This was mid-20s, yes.
It's the dream job. So you're in your mid-20s, helping college students discover the world.
So the problem was that I met a girl from Oklahoma on one of those trips. And then I was working for the company in the U.S. and eventually I got married in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Really?
I never lived there, moved to New Orleans, and went back to college and got an MBA in New Orleans at Loyola University. So, and then I wasn't sure what to do. I got offers, banking offers, 2 job offers, plus 2 friends of mine also from the company I worked for. 2 of the managers were in Illinois, and they started up their own company, and they asked me if I'm interested. So the 3 of us then decided where are we going. So we said, let's start up the company in Los Angeles. So in 1982, so I was 30 years old at the time, we came to Los Angeles, actually to Northridge here, and started our first company, which was STI, Student Travel International. The thing is, once you are traveling the world, once you see all these cultures and so on, it's hard to get out of the travel industry again. Yeah, so with that, the company was basically similar to what I did before as a tour guide. Yeah, it was travel for college graduate students from all over the U.S., mainly to Europe, but also we did a little to Asia, a little to Egypt and so on, but mainly Europe. And it was motor coach travel. That was in 82. In 2090, I was president of the company, but I was only 1/3 owner, and the 2 partners sometimes made decisions I didn't kind of like. So eventually I said, look, either I buy the majority or I'm out. They didn't want to sell. So I sold out my share and I started my second company, actually here in Calabasas, not far from here. And that was Amadeus International Tours. And that was 1990 when the Gulf War started and when the terrorism was going on in Europe and the parents wouldn't pay for their kids to go to Europe. So after 2 years, actually, I shut it down. And I got a job offer from a company in Encino here, and that was Love Holidays. Love Holidays at that time was one of the prime tour operators for Yugoslavia, upscale tour operators, with a Yugoslavian. Serbe Ilic was the owner from Yugoslavia. But with the civil war in Yugoslavia, that business went down the drain. And he hired me to start up new projects. And in 92, when he hired me, I was looking at what all I can start with. And one of the things I started was river cruising. In September 92, the Main-Danube Canal was opened for the first time. That's a connection from the Main River to the Danube. About 800 years ago, Charlemagne already tried to build a canal but failed. And then again in the 1840s, 1850s, they connected again the two rivers briefly, but it always filled up and it was not really feasible for transportation. So they shut it down again. And then eventually the canal was finished in September 92. And the whole idea was for the first time you can cruise long-distance cruises, because now suddenly you can reach 15 countries with one ship. In the past, river cruising in Europe you had two key companies. In Austria, you had the DDSG, Donaudampfschifffahrtsgesellschaft, Danube Steamship Company, and in Germany you had KD. KD stands for Cologne-Düsseldorf. Yeah, and those were the two for short-distance river cruising. With the opening of the Main-Danube Canal, suddenly you could go really from Amsterdam to the Black Sea.
You know how long was the maximum possible, journey that you could take prior to the canal opening?
I mean, on the Danube, you could do longer cruises because you also could go all the way down to Romania, Bulgaria. Yeah, and it was mostly older Romanian, Bulgarian ships, very low class and so on. There were several companies that they did it. Yeah, but the big one was really in Austria was the government company of DDSG. Yeah, so I created the first cruise from Amsterdam to Budapest. Yeah, and I remember in my office, so actually that was at Love Holidays. Love Holidays later on changed the name to Love Holidays/Uniworld and eventually became Uniworld. So from the Serbian Yugoslavian tour company, it changed into a river cruise line. So Uniworld is still around today. It was later on bought by the Travel Corporation and so on. So at Uniworld, I created the first Amsterdam to Budapest itinerary, 14 nights, and I had no clue how long it takes to go upriver, downriver, and so on, and how many locks were there. So I had in my office all around the wall a map of all the locks of the journey and so on. And so...
How do you go about designing one of these journeys? Do you plot the experiences along the way, or what sort of comes first,
First, you do the research. How far can you travel on a ship in a day from town to town? Yeah. So you looked at current markets, for example, what DDSG and what KD did in their region, and then you tried to cross over how you would cross the Main-Danube Canal. That was the most difficult part. Yeah. And then you pick a town and you see how far is the next town. So it's very important when you pick a certain town, you have to have a certain distance before the next town is. And in between you have 16 other towns, which are beautiful. Yeah. So on the Danube, you could schedule endless variations of itinerary, really.
Okay.
But what happened on the Danube, the first itinerary I put together kind of became almost a standard part for future itineraries and other cruise lines because they all started copying it. So there was this little town on the Danube, Dürnstein, with 100 inhabitants. Yeah, and I ended up going there because of the beautiful church, because of the little castle above it and so on. And today there are probably, I would say, 600,000 people coming to Dürnstein from the river cruises, maybe 1 million, yeah, because everybody wants to stop there today. But there are lots of little towns, and now we are slowly spreading out where we visit multiple other towns. But the thing was, being already in the travel industry for many years, what happened with the first river cruise experience, people came back totally excited about how it was. The reactions were wonderful compared to motor coach tours and so on. So the feedback was fantastic. Yeah, and what we realized is really it's the ease of travel. The only unpacking one time, plus getting the double leisure time every day from any other means of transportation. If you go by motor coach, you have to pick up when you leave the hotel. You have to go to your motor coach. You have to drive through crowded cities. Today, when you go on the freeways, more and more freeways have sound blocks where you cannot even see the landscape anymore and so on. Whereas on the river, yeah, you just, you are physically, many times we are cruising like 16 hours a day, and you don't even realize it, because you get off in one city where the ship is still moving forward 5 hours, and you go on the ship 5 hours further upriver. Yeah, and by motor coach, by bus, it's only maybe 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also we in most places we cruise through the night.
Yeah.
So you go to bed at night, and the next morning you wake up in the next city.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could really cover one big city in a day or 2 smaller towns in a day. Yeah. Plus you have all the leisure time. Yeah. You don't have to pack, you don't have to unpack, you don't have to worry about traffic. Yeah. You can sit at a bar, cruise into Amsterdam, step off the bar, and walk into downtown.
Right into the middle of the action.
Yeah, and that was the real luxury of river cruising, was the time, suddenly, the time you gained. And what I realized when it started, people did not even know what to do with all this time. Yeah. And then it was really a surprise to many, because they used to go on vacation with packing, unpacking, and so on, and suddenly, wow, yeah, they could go out, take a bike, go out, ride around, read their books, and so on.
Yeah, you're always busy, aren't you?
Yes.
Unpacking, repacking, figuring out your journey.
So there, I started at, so Uniworld became a river cruise line. It was really kind of the first one in the U.S. market. At Uniworld, then I started in the late 90s chartering ships from Viking. So Viking River Cruises started in 97 in Europe as ship owners. But didn't really have much of a retail outlet, so they mostly were chartering ships to different operators. And at Uniworld, through some friends in Switzerland, I started chartering ships from Viking. And so we had probably 30-40% of the Viking inventory was chartered by Uniworld. Not only in Europe, we also chartered a ship in Russia, the Kirov, the Pakhomov, actually 2 ships in Russia, and so on. And then one day, the owner of Uniworld, Sörbe Illich, met with Thor Hagen, the owner of Viking, and he came back from his meeting 2 years after working with them, because Sörbe Illich never got involved much into this setup. And he came back to me and said, look, cancel our agreements with Viking. Yeah, I don't want to deal with them anymore. I am concerned. Yeah, we go a different route, because I also had met another gentleman, Kurt Kamphuysen, whose family owned a small cruise line in Europe, in the Netherlands. And he was saying, let's focus on that and build up our fleet.
What was the concern at the time with Viking and the direction they were taking?
It was a personal concern between Sörbe and Thor. Yeah, a personal concern more. But also it was more, I think that Sörbe wanted to go a different route with a Dutch family. Okay. So, but what happened as a consequence, Viking contacted me and asked me if I'm interested in setting up an office in the U.S. So that was in 2000 when I left Uniworld here in Encino, and I opened a Viking office in Woodland Hills, just down the street here. So I left Uniworld with about 15 people. There are several in our office who went with me.
How did that go down when you take probably the best?
Viking was suing every single one individually.
Okay.
Yeah, just to make it. I mean, not the Uniworld was suing everyone. Yeah, but Viking was fully behind us. Yeah, so Schach in our air department, I hired him in 96 or 97 at Uniworld. Yeah. And so is Dennis, our guy who handles our Mekong cruises and so on. He also was with me already at the Uniworld and at Viking and so on. Then in 2000, I opened Viking here in Woodland Hills. I had a 2-year contract, and I met Christine actually at Viking. So that's how we met. After about 7-8 months, I kind of had enough of Viking. Yeah. Jimmy Murphy, Gary's father, was the owner of Brandon Tours. And at Uniworld, Brandon Tours was one of the key sellers of Uniworld cruises. And when I opened Viking, Brandon moved everything from Uniworld over to Viking. And then one day, so when Jimmy retired and Gary became president of Brandon Tours, Jimmy retired, and then Jimmy and I slowly had meetings somewhere in a little place here in Calabasas.
I just love what a small world the whole world of cruising is. It's like a sort of on the river mafia. Everyone's ended up sort of in 5 miles of Calabasas.
So Jimmy and I started already discussing setting up our own cruise line.
Okay.
So then Christine actually joined me at Viking. Yeah, and so after the 2-year contract was over, I already had my plans to start my own cruise line during that time. So after I left Viking in January 2022, and I had a non-compete until June 30th, 2022. And at midnight, July 1, after midnight, I incorporated this cruise line.
How do you even go about starting a cruise line business of all the intimidating kind of CapEx heavy businesses to run?
It sounds
Ships
like
that need maintenance.
People always ask me, do you have rich parents? Do you have Russian investors or something? No, you really don't need a whole lot to. Yeah, I leased. We started leasing ships initially, so we had. From my times at Uniworld already, I knew already all the shipping operators in Europe. Yeah, and we reached out to 2 different companies. One was actually Lüftner with the Amadeus cruises. One was Skiller Tours, and Lüftner was actually the one who said, okay, he's going to build a new ship for us. Lüftner he's an Austrian cruise operator who operated Romanian and Bulgarian ships on the Danube. And at Uniworld, I reached out to Lüftner to build a new ship for us. Then when I signed a 5-year agreement that we will charter the ship for 5 years. And when we got the ship also, I named the ship Amadeus.
Yeah.
So all his ships today are named Amadeus. Amadeus 1, Amadeus Silva, and so on and so on. Then the next year he built a second ship, and Uniworld switched from the Amadeus to the Amadeus 2, which was later on named, I think, Amadeus not Classic, but got another name. But when his contract with Uniworld expired, that was the year when I started. Yeah, and so he was ready to build a ship for us, and it was the Amadeus Symphony. So the company was called, I named the company Amadeus Waterways, and the ship we got from Lüftner was Amadeus Symphony.
Okay.
He complained to me about it, that my name and so on, and I said, look, I named your first ship, so don't complain about it, okay? So he named all his ships Amadeus. So we leased the Amadeus Symphony for 5 years, and it was Christine and me, the only ones in the office at our company. But we had, as a backup, we had Brandon Tours. Mm-hmm. So Brandon Tours did a could immediately accept credit cards in our name. Yeah. Because otherwise, when you start a new business, it takes you 3-4 years before you can get a merchant account and so on. So with Brandon, it was easy. They did the back office accounting for us. They did the back office flight arrangements for us and so on. But so it was only Christine and me for 2 years in the office, no salaries. Yeah, the first year with this one ship, we lost, I think we lost $430,000, but we had a positive cash flow. So it was, and 1992 was not an easy year.
Well, I presume it's quite a good cash flow business because you get paid quite a long time.
Right.
Yeah. Never really thought about it.
So then the second year, Globus wanted to buy us because Brandon Tours, Jimmy Murphy had a very tight relationship with Globus Tours. Yeah, so actually we went to Lugano, Jimmy, Gary, and I, and Jimmy wanted to sell part of it or all of it because it would have been a quick, nice profit. I didn't want to sell, so I stayed actually in Lugano with Marco Rizzi, the managing director there. Jimmy and Gary went home. I stayed in Lugano, and we hammered out a deal where Globus would start their own cruise line, Avalon Waterways. We would share 30% of interest, so I gave them 30% of our company. We got 30% of Avalon, and they hired me for 2 years as their consultant and managing their products. So I was also involved in their ship leases, in setting up the program. They actually paid me handsomely $35,000 a month for the 2 years. So at that time was nice to have a nice income on the side. So we came out and with a co-share program. So we would sell their ships, they would sell our ships. Besides the Amadeus Symphony, which we had, we also started leasing a ship in Russia.
Can I just ask how that works? Because they're quite heavily branded experiences. So when you're selling someone else's inventory, how does the code sharing?
We sell it as Amawaterways, all ships, and they sold it as Globus, all ships.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. They just, there was not much of a brand awareness outside. Yeah, they just sold it as Avalon Waterways. We sold it as Amadeus Waterways and so on. Yeah.
But on the same ship.
On the same ship. On the same ship. Yeah. And then eventually...
I've just because this is a bit of a niche point, but how did you handle the brand aspect of that? Because if someone buys, an Avalon itinerary, a journey, and then they turn up on a ship that's branded Ama Waterways.
No, even today, Avalon as well as Uniworld take space on certain cruise lines and take 20 cabins, for example, on unbranded Uniworld ships, just for their groups.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still happening today. Okay. Yeah, so even in the beginnings, we would also take groups. When we were small enough, we wouldn't take the whole ship, but have groups and so on. Yeah. So it's still happening today. Okay. We are not doing it. Yeah. But other cruise lines are still doing that.
Because presumably that just leads to a level of commoditization of what people buy into.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Yeah. So then eventually, after about 2 years partnership with Globus, they wanted to exit the whole agreement because they realized this is growing by leaps and bounds. The demand is fantastic. The response is fantastic. So they wanted to exit the agreement. And with that exit, we got enough cash as a down payment for our first own ship. That was in 2005. And then we ordered the Amadagio. So the Amadagio was our first ship built in 2006. 110 meters. We have a model here. Yeah. So then plus...
Was that just a dream from a design perspective, being able to control how the thing is built and looks and feels?
Yes, it was, because what happened prior to that, when I was involved in ship construction already for Uniworld, I had a slightly different philosophy. At that time, the ships were small, 110 meters. The 135 meter was legally allowed only a few years later by European governments. So when the first ships were out there, my vision was always that the main restaurant is on the top deck in the aft with beautiful views and so on. When it came in 2005 to building my first ship, I explored all the other cruise lines, and I looked at exactly at the deck plans and so on. And what I learned is that Skiller, they have today probably 40 ships, was doing the most efficient layout of any ship. What they had is they had the public areas in the front and the staterooms in the aft. Whereas still at Uniworld and some other cruise lines, you had a mix. You had public areas in the front. The key problem was that where today the restaurants are in the front, under the lounge area, used to be staterooms on the Uniworld ships.
Okay, yeah.
But in the front, you have both thrusters. When you're in bed and the both thrusters come on, you fall out of your bed. It's so noisy.
Really?
Yeah. Plus, you have the dance floor above you and so on.
Okay.
So eventually, it was dividing public area and staterooms was very important.
Yeah.
And from then, today, it's all done like this, pretty much across the board.
You're a lover of design. You like design. You admitted to tinkering with Photoshop.
I studied architecture, so design was always, art and design was always something I loved very much.
Most people who like architecture and like design, they dream about that day they buy their piece of land and they can build their dream house. I mean, you got to build a ship. What was the feeling like when you first were in a position where you could exercise a level of agency over how this thing came to life and was built?
So the interesting part was about the cabins. What do you do about the cabins? Yeah, I didn't like much what I saw over there. So I went through all the websites of ocean cruise lines and looked at their cabins and didn't like much I saw. Then I started looking at hotels. And in the end, I found the Mandarin Oriental in New York. And I took a shot of a room, and then in Photoshop I edited and made a cabin on a ship out of a hotel room.
So you took inspiration from the Mandarin in New York.
I took inspiration from all different sites, but the Mandarin in New York was one of them, which probably inspired me most.
Yeah.
But I took elements from different sites, so I didn't create something new. I tried to find the perfect match, And I was very good in Photoshop. So if I take a picture of you, I can do crazy things with it. So I sent the whole thing to Europe. I said, this is how the cabin should look like. So then at the shipyard, it's Wilhelmsen, the carpentry shop. Today when you go to Wilhelmsen, you can go from this Uniworld cabin to this Avalon cabin to this scenic cabin and so on. He has about 25, 30 one-by-one cabins in his carpentry shop. But so when I came with my design and when we finally selected the fabrics and everything, Wilhelmsen himself and also my shipbuilder, Kurt Kamphuysen, thought, okay, they have their own design, and their design was kind of more the Italian gray-white, very, at that time, very stylish, So when we looked at the cabins, I said, absolutely no, forget the US. This is what I want, this is what I send you, and so on. I like color.
Yeah.
I like, it has come through slowly, I like reds. So we went, on the first ship, we physically picked from the plates to the spoons to the glasses to the fabrics, everything, every single item. It was a very tedious part of design. Especially with the fabrics. You cannot just pick regular fabrics. You have to have fireproof fabrics, specially made for this kind of environment and so on. Woods, you had to put lightweight stuff, marble and so on. So it was going through the selection was a very intense project, but really enjoyable.
What was the maiden voyage?
So the ship was christened in Amsterdam, which I never did again. Because first of all, it started in April. It's cold, it's rainy, and so on. And we had music out there and so on, but it was a bad environment. So
just a bit dreary.
what we did later on also, we started cruising for several weeks before we had a christening ceremony.
Okay.
Because
fine.
when the ship comes straight out of the yard, and then you have the first cruise, it's really shakedown cruise still.
Yeah.
So later on, we did most of our christening ceremonies later on in Wilshofen in Germany, on the Danube. And then we picked one place in Germany, in Lahnstein. In Lahnstein, we have our own docking place where we had several ceremonies in Lahnstein, christening ceremony. Christening ceremony is basically bottle of champagne, pick a good godmother and have a big party with fireworks and so on.
What's the godmother? Can you talk to me about the godmother, the premise of the godmother?
Okay, so the first godmother of
we were having some funny chats about this last night over a margarita, so let's tell everyone else.
The first godmother was Sheila Murphy, Jimmy's wife. She passed away just last November. Yeah. So the idea was the Murphys number 1, Christine and me number 2, and then the Australian partners number 3. In that circle, we rotate. So Sheila was the first godmother. The second godmother were Christine and my daughter. Yeah. So Isabel and Julie were the godmothers of the Amallegro in Vienna. The third one was then the daughter of Jeff McGeary. Yeah. And then the fourth one was again a Murphy. So it was Susan Murphy. The next one should have been Christine after that. But we were at a trade show in Las Vegas, and it was Signature Travel, and the godmother and the president of Signature. But Christine walked up to her and said, "Would you like to be the godmother of our next ship?" And she said, "Absolutely, yes." Yeah. So she became the godmother of our...
What are the godmother responsibilities? What responsibilities does the godmother of a ship have to play?
I mean, the responsibility of a godmother is similar as in regular life, a godfather or a godmother of a child. Yeah, it's somebody who should basically the whole life kind of watch over and help out and be there and so on. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's also a huge kind of accomplishment for people to become a godmother. Yeah. So from that moment on, every godmother afterwards was one of the key industry travel ladies in North America. But then also we picked one from the UK at one point for a Douro ship. So the only one which was really not in the trade industry was Shandstone. So Shandstone was the godmother of the ship in Portugal, but otherwise it was always industry people. So again, now we have industry people for Portugal. We have Jen Lee coming in as a godmother in April. We do not do christening ceremonies in Egypt. We're not in a Christian country, so we don't do any of this. A christening is a religious ceremony, so we don't do it in Egypt. So that's kind of the story. Now we have a whole series of fantastic godmothers. One of them is actually the president of Carnival Cruise Line. She was at that time the head of Clear when she was a godmother, and later on she became the president of Carnival.
Wow. What's your really? You've had many business lives. You know, you're clearly a bit of a serial entrepreneur. You know, you haven't just started one business and run it through. You know, you've been almost in every part of the world in which you operate in, you know, which is fascinating. But you also, you know, you must be driven by love of the river, you know, from those days exploring the Amazon. And what is it about the river that excites you, and river cruising as a format that you think is so special?
I'm not sure if it's partially where you grew up. Yeah, and what Christine always says, she grew up in Dresden on the Elbe River. I grew up in Vienna on the Danube River. Yeah, I always liked water. I liked fishing. I'm not a big ocean fisher, but I love river fishing and so on. So I always enjoyed the river. I would say that the whole Amazon experience was something, building the raft. Yeah, every morning we hiked up next to the river with machetes. We cut down some balsam trees. We put 6, 7 balsam trees in the water. We were hugging them, floating down into a little bay. Yeah, another guy was sitting there catching the piranhas while we were in the water. Seriously. Yeah. And we're putting the whole thing together, and then floating down the river was a wonderful experience. Most of the time you could float without, just when you went into a tight curve, yeah, you had to make sure you get out, because otherwise you went under the trees and your hut was gone, which happened several times. But it was a fantastic experience, and we had no time limit when we were there. At one point on the river, there was a little canal going into a settlement, and we rowed up the canal with this massive raft, rowed up, got to the settlement, we tied on, and we were invited by the indigenous people to stay in one of the empty huts there. So we stayed there. The next morning we came back, and the water level had dropped so much that the raft was on land. We were there 2 months before the water went up again. We could go on. So 2 months, just in that. Yes.
What's that like?
There was no hurry.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was a settlement with probably about 15 units. Yeah, so there was lots to do, lots of research to do. We learned a lot there on housing and so on, and had nice neighbors. Went on hunting trips, on fishing trips with them. Yeah, it was.
What makes you tick? What's the like intrinsic drive that gets you up in the morning?
I would say adventure, new things. What can I do better?
Have there been any personal experiences that have been particularly pertinent and you feel have shaped you?
I would say that probably one of the most important experiences in my travel was when we stayed with the Limbus in Nepal, Sikkim, in that area, and we wanted already to leave. We thought we said a certain time we are there, and they said, "Can you stay another week, because a big event is coming together?" And what happened there is they had this annual event where all the tribes from the different regions came together and celebrated for a whole week out in the wilderness, setting up tents and so on. And it was kind of a very religious but also fun atmosphere with different foods, different spirits, and so on, and often very religious ceremonies. And it was so heavily impacting us, all of us, that this was something we've never experienced. Yeah, there was probably one thing to learn more about other cultures.
Yeah.
Yeah. I started, for example, in Portugal with Mario Ferreira when I was at Uniworld with the first river cruise ship in Portugal. Yeah, we built a ship together. He's now one of my best friends. Portugal has today 30-something ships on the river. But it was the first project and so on. Always looking at new things. When my daughter was 18, I didn't have a birthday present for her. So I said, "Here's my present. You can go anywhere in the world for 2 weeks with me. You pick the place and we go." And for 6, 7 years, every year, she picked a destination and I traveled with her. One of the destinations she picked was Vietnam and Cambodia. Yeah, and I said, "Okay, we are there. I'm going to check out the river also." And so I got contacts, and we were actually on a river cruise, on a local small river cruise and so on. And I thought, I can chart it. But after the whole experience, I said, I want to build my own ships. That's how I started the whole thing in Vietnam. Yeah, the whole experience right now, for example, with Colombia and the Magdalena River. It's a destination where we are really starting from scratch. There's no infrastructure there. Yeah, it's a river that Colombia has 52 million people, and about 32 million live in the Magdalena River basin. When we went on an exploration trip with motorboat there, it was so fascinating to us. People are asking me about sustainability. What do you do about the ship sustainability? I said, the ship doesn't matter there. There are 32 million people where a lot of their toilets go into the river. Yeah. I want to clean up the river, not with my ship, but I want to help teach the people what to do. Because when I was traveling around there, you see a lot of waste, just unnecessary waste. Yeah, it's easy to control that. And I think the learning part is very important. Yeah. You see that, we have been several times all over. You see it in India, you see it everywhere. You see,
very bad.
Yeah, at the beginning of a village and the end of the village, you see big piles. Yeah, in the past it wasn't plastic. In the past it was natural things. Today it's plastics. Yeah, and so on.
Really saddens me. I used to do an annual sort of motorbike trip through the foothills of the Himalayas, which is where my parents used to live, and the roads are beautiful, the scenery is incredible, but you will go to villages in the middle, deep in the mountain ranges, and there's still a litter problem. You're in the place of the most untouched, abject beauty, and there's like Lay's crisp packets on the ground. It's deeply, it's tragic.
And it is truly a learning experience because, for example, we were in Rwanda, Christine and I wanted to, for my 65th birthday, I wanted to go to see the gorillas. You don't see a piece of trash anywhere in Rwanda. Nothing. Clean as can be, yeah? And it really comes down, and it's the most densely populated country, actually, by square mile in Africa. But clean as can be, because the president and the government puts a heavy focus on on cleaning up the country, yeah? So it's a learning process.
What would people expect when they go on a river cruise? I feel like it's a category that, unless you've engaged with it before, you perhaps don't know much about. I think people sort of understand what happens, on an ocean cruise, and I think people understand maybe like other forms of touring. But what is like the special thing about this category that you love?
I think when the whole thing started, there was this misconception, or maybe it wasn't a misconception, but it was really kind of Europeans cruising on European ships. Yeah. And Europeans, younger people, they wanted to be active, and it was mostly the people who just wanted to sit on the ship and read, and they knew their country. Yeah, they just wanted a relaxing time. That maybe had put the whole thing in as old people, not much to do, and so on. Yeah, when we started, we brought in totally different. We brought in North Americans mainly to Europe. Yeah, and the idea was to make it as active as possible from the get-go. Yeah, and what you can do today, you can make it so active that when you're done with the cruise, you want to go on vacation. If you want to be totally active, yeah. So the whole thing has changed, and over the years also it has become more and more embraced, yeah. And I would say that Viking did a great job in marketing the whole product, yeah, and making the masses aware of what's going on. And the growth has been phenomenal in river cruising. Yeah, like I said, one part is the amount of leisure time you have, plus also people on the one side like to buy and want to see the big cities, the cities with names, Vienna, Budapest, Amsterdam, and so on. On the other side, once they're there, they love the small communities. And I think there's also now slowly more and more a change away from mass tourism and looking at more quiet places, more hidden places, and so on. So I think we have unlimited possibilities here. Because there are so many towns, especially on the Danube, on the Rhine. Every single town has beautiful stuff to offer, but you only see a small portion of it.
How have you seen over the 22 years?
It's going to be 23 years in July here at Ammerwatermist, but I've been doing it since 92.
20, long time, basically.
For me, it's now 32 years, 33 years in river cruising.
It's not an insignificant stint in an industry. How have you seen the customer change? The sort of high net worth or the affluent or, the aspirational, adventurer, how have you seen their concept of adventure and of travel change?
I think whenever you have a new destination or a new adventure experience, the first ones you get are those who have done everything. Yeah, and they're looking for new things. So we initially also, we had a lot of older people. Because they've done everything, they were always searching what's out there, what's new, yeah? So you had a much older age group in the 90s than you have today because of searching for the product more. The younger ones, they went with friends, what's popular? Yeah, an ocean cruise or a vacation cruise or Bahamas or something is popular, let's do that, yeah? Whereas river cruise was not even popular, yeah? So, and even also the trade community didn't know much about it. Once they learned about it, once the word got out, yeah, it started growing. Yeah, and today it's really growing faster than, I would say, pretty much most other travel areas. Yeah, so it is a wonderful way to see a destination. Like we always say, or Christine loves this phrase, rivers take you through the country, yeah, and whereas ocean cruises take you outside. But so it's a wonderful way to see it. You can sit on the top deck and just watch the scenery go by, watch towns go by. You can take your bike, get a helmet, go out there, ride on your own. You have so many opportunities to do different things. Yeah.
Well, especially as these days the world by road is so boring. You mentioned it before. Certainly if you're on a highway, sometimes you really have no sense of where you are. But roads have become so good in a way for driving that they've also become terribly boring. And being in a car itself, and over the next 5 years when everything's electrified, is also quite a boring experience. It feels like being in a go-kart. There's no nothing analog within it. There's no pneumatic, there's just no sense of
And especially in Europe, because what they're doing now, they're building more and more sound walls. So you don't even see anymore what's behind the freeway. Yeah, all you see is big walls.
But it's also one of those things where the things that you do see off the side of the freeway, you look at with a certain sadness, don't you? You look at it and you're like, I'm glad I don't live on the edge of the freeway. You see a charming windmill and you just look at it with a sad look and think, I'd hate to be in that windmill. It's next to a 6-lane motorway. It's not like a charming or calming or pleasant way to see anything, really.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There are very few ways. Even rail, it lacks the charm. There are certain, the Orient Express, and there are certain journeys that you can take by train that are magical. That charm has been lost, and the pace of everything, I think, has eradicated the slowness of going somewhere on a barge, going somewhere on a riverboat, going somewhere in a slower manner.
Yeah.
Well, what does luxury mean to you today?
What does luxury mean to me? I think the whole concept of luxury has changed a lot. I think luxury used to be scarcity, valuable goods which other people couldn't afford, and services which maybe other people couldn't afford. To me, luxury today is, number one, time. Time is big luxury, and comfort, simple comfort. No matter if it's the food comfort or the service comfort, It should be good quality environment, yeah, but comfort is the most important part. Having a good bed, having a good pillow, having a good coffee, having maybe some flowers in your, and so on. So high quality, small items, high quality, very important. Health is important. Wellness is important. Yeah, this to me is when you can get this all into your package. Yeah, to me this is luxury. Service is the top important part. For us, our cruise managers are the best people out there. Yeah, they are the ones who represent us on the ship. They are there 24/7 every single day. And the cruise manager is not on the ship for a whole season. The cruise manager meets our people at the airport, goes with them to, if there's a pre-extension for 3 days to the hotel, goes with them to the ship, and afterwards goes with them to the airport, and then goes home and takes another assignment in a different place. So they only are there for maybe a 10, 12-day assignment. During those 10, 12 days, they are 24/7 available for the guests. Yeah.
How do they train for? They need to have, very good knowledge of everything.
Okay, so the way they train, first of all, the selection process is very intense. Yeah, it's a highly rewarded position, so you make very good money as a cruise manager. So the selection, we get lots of inquiries for the job. Yeah, we have a managing director from California who sits in Basel. Yeah, and he does the training. Once the selection process is done, once they are selected, then they are going together with cruise managers on training cruises. First of all, watching what they're doing, and then the next step is they are slowly taking over, and one of the experienced cruise managers is going with them just to make sure what they're doing is right. Mm-hmm. And then eventually they are on their own, yeah, and to do it on their own. But it's a fairly long process, yeah. Also, what we are doing, every year we increase by a fixed rate the base daily rate of a cruise manager. Every year there's a fixed increase. So somebody who has been with us already 10 years, 15 years, makes a lot of money. Yeah. And they stay on, yeah. But they make very good money. Yeah, most of them work somewhere like 7-8 months. Yeah, I mean, they have like maybe 10, 15 assignments.
There are certain job roles that I am just fascinated by. General managers in hospitality destinations that are far-flung. That's one role that people with, sort of 1-year-old children just sort of going off to the Maldives for 3 months at a time and then flying back to Dubai or wherever where their family are parked. But also just the disposition of just how you're wired to just like understand every guest, understand every destination, such an extrovert and like people person, and find it just a fascinating type of person.
I mean, they are really all of them. They're all of them unique. They're all unique, yeah.
Completely agree. Are there like emerging trends in travel that you feel excited about, that you think are good ones?
I mean, emerging trends. I think one emerging trend. It seems there's more and more talk about over-tourism in certain parts and shutting down and restricting access for tourism. And I think also that today people are looking more and more to get away to unknown places. Yeah. So I think there's that part, I think, and especially I think the younger age group is more interested in finding new ways to get away and finding new interests. That's, I think, for me, kind of the biggest one. Yeah, since COVID, it seems the COVID years with the lack of travel opportunities supercharged people afterwards for experiences more. Then they've missed 2 years of experiences and now they want to do it. And the more they do it, the more they want it. Yeah, and I think it went away from from goods, expensive goods, cars and so on, more into experiences.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of more older people traveling as well. You know, we live for longer, healthcare is better, medicine is better, people are able, and if you have money, normally it's working for you at that point.
Yeah.
You're freed up, empty nesters, and, you know, people go and find the romance of their relationship again and travel around the world. You know, you see more and more of it. I'm very fortunate if you're in that position, but if you are in that position, there's a whole world of possibility and you know, adventure to engage in. And speaking of adventure, what is the thing that you've done that's felt most adventurous recently? Because it's harder to find adventure.
I mean, recently, what have I done recently? One thing...
Recency is a concept that changes based on age. So let's say in the last decade.
One thing, I love business travel. Yeah, for me, business travel is actually more exciting even than vacation travel.
Same, give me pleasure.
And we were last Christmas, New Year's. Yeah, Christine spent Christmas with her family in Germany. I spent it with my kids here. And on the December 25, I flew to Oman, and Christine and I met in Muscat, in Oman. We spent several days in Oman, and then we had New Year's in Riyadh, and we spent 6 days in Saudi Arabia. 2 nights in Riyadh, 2 in Alula, and 2 in Jeddah. And I loved the 6 days.
Because you're off to margaritas, Rudi.
Yeah, not a sip of alcohol for 6 days. Yeah, we were New Year's Eve at the Billionaires Club in Riyadh. 80% Saudis, 20% foreigners, no alcohol, lots of balloons. At midnight, the foreigners were all hugging and kissing, whereas the Saudis were like, what's happening here? Kind of not knowing, because they have a totally different calendar. Yeah, but it was a wonderful experience. But also, I think part of the experience was also being on a semi-business trip, knowing, I had a reception in Jeddah at the Ritz-Carlton. I got out of the van and I thought the prince must be here. Some prince must be here, because they had a whole group. They had about 20 people on the sideline with swords and costumes and drums and music. And then I realized it's for me. I have a fantastic video about this. Yeah, they actually took a Ritz-Carlton video. When you are on a business trip, you meet the locals. They introduce you to the local atmosphere in a different way and so on. And so business trips for me are always a ton of fun, really a ton of fun. Yeah, I cannot sit on a beach. I'm not a beach guy who just sits in the sun or in the shade somewhere. I like to be active. I like villages. I like towns. I like bars. I like cafes. Yeah, that's my kind of thing.
Rudi, we always ask our guests the same 4 questions. And my first question to you, and I'm sure that you will probably have quite a pronounced answer for this, is what would you like to change about the industry? If you could change one thing tomorrow.
I wouldn't change much about the industry. If I want to change something, I change it.
If you're asking the Godfather of an industry what they changed, then fair enough. Maybe they pronounce that.
But if I want to change it, I do change it.
What are the things really that concern you about the world that we're leaving?
I would say today my biggest concern is the destruction of natural habitat. It's shrinking everywhere, and especially if I look at South America and the Amazon, what's happening. I've been in the Amazon like I said, 50 years ago. We were in the Amazon again about a year and a half ago. Christine and I, there was low water problems. On the Brazilian side, they had something like over 100 dead dolphins because the water heat was over 100 degrees and so on. So the shrinkage of the Amazon forest but also deforestation in other parts of the world. Yeah, is wildlife restraints are being reduced everywhere. So there are, on the other side, projects out there, where people physically buy up land and try to reforest and put animals back in. So, but my biggest concern is the destruction of natural habitat. Much of it unnecessary. Plus also what they found out now in some of the regions in Brazil, that the indigenous people who drink the water there are having major health concerns because of when they do mining, they use all different kinds of chemicals for mining, and that's being then it floats down into their drink water supplies and so on and so on. Yeah, so there are big concerns, and it's in many cases it's purely for profit.
Yeah.
Out of control of governments, in areas and so on. And this is I would say today, my biggest concern.
If you had to give up your job tomorrow and change categories, you're not having no easy routes out of this question, what would you do?
Two things I probably would be very interested in. Yeah, and like I said, one of the things is one of our South African partners. We have this Zambezi Queen together with the family and the father. He's now 82. What he does is purchasing lands and rebuilding it and so on, and renaturalizing it with new animals. This is something I can see myself getting involved in.
Well, just on that, the last episode of this podcast was with Ben Goldsmith, who's a conservationist in the United Kingdom. And the entire episode is about rewilding, which I think you would really enjoy listening to based on that answer.
Yeah, and like I said, the whole Magdalena River project, is intriguing for me also, that I probably would like to do more there with sustainability, cleaning up, but education mainly, Spending, I've made some good money. I have lots of resources available for that, and I wouldn't mind spending some or a big portion of those resources eventually for education.
Well, it's lovely to hear that. What's the thing that excites you most in the next 5 years? What is the spark in your eye?
The unknown. The unknown, not knowing what happens tomorrow. Being always open for new adventures. Whatever comes, taking on new opportunities.
I think it would be difficult for me to end this podcast without asking you two questions to finish on. The first is, why the name? And the second is, do you mind just telling everyone how you met Christine?
So why the name? Amar Waterways.
Yeah.
Okay. My second company I had was Amadeus International Tours. And I actually had the name Amadeus International Tours only I found out later on, 1 year after Amadeus, the airline reservation system, came to the U.S. Yeah. But for me, the reason Amadeus is a unique name. When I had a company, Amadeus International Tours, we also had, remember the song Amadeus, Amadeus? Yeah, so when you were on the phone, you all made Amadeus, Amadeus. and being Austrian, I think it's a very good name. It's a clean name. Plus, in the alphabet, it stood before American in the alphabet. So I got a head start there. Then when I tried to incorporate Amadeus Waterways, the airline reservation system, Amadeus, and they had a software program also, Amadeus Cruises. Yeah, they blocked it. My attorney said, we can fight it. I said, no, let's not fight it. So Ama means love, Deus means God. So I said, no more gods, only love. So I changed it from Amadeus to Ama Waterways.
Okay.
So that's the name of Ama Waterways. How I met Christine? So I opened up the Viking office in Woodland Hills. Christine came from Germany with a 4-year-old daughter and her husband, 2,000 dogs. And Christine was in Germany as well as in Zurich working for American Express. So she studied travel at the university. She has an engineering degree in travel. A marketing engineering degree, which was this is very unique for East Germany. Yeah, so she came from East Germany, and she, when the wall came down in '89, that's when she graduated. Okay. Yeah, and then she immediately joined American Express there. Then she transferred with American Express to Zurich. They had a Christmas party in 2010 at a Argentinian restaurant in Encino, and usually at the Christmas party, an hour or 2 hours into the party, Christine grabs a microphone, talks a little, then hands it over to me to talk also a little bit. So she was talking, wishing everybody Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and so on, and then she handed over to me, and I'm like, what do I say? So I got on my knees and I said, do you want to marry me? Completely out of the blue, no ring, nothing. The crowd was so noisy, I did not hear her answer. Everybody was screaming and yelling and so on, but she married me.
Said no, so, she had no option.
So we wanted to get married on April 10, half in between our two birthdays. But then on April 10, there was a clear Cruise Line International, the annual conference. So we had to move the wedding by a week because for her, the conference was more important. So we got married on the 23rd of April, and on our honeymoon trip, we went to Africa.
Beautiful.
And what was interesting on the Africa trip is she said, no river cruises. We go on safari, we do lodges and so on. I did all my research, and I found this little ship, the Zambezi Queen. I said, can we do a couple of nights on this ship? And she said, absolutely no. And I asked again and again, and one day she said, okay. And in one of her weak moments, she said, okay. So we spent 2 nights on the Zambezi Queen during our Africa trip, and the owner was there, and the architect was there. And she said, fantastic. We have to put that into our program. So that's why we have this Zambezi Queen now. But you have to go around to her.
Well, what a nicer way to substantiate the meaning of the word ama than the marriage of its founders. Really,
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.